This is the figure of Ramses II, who ruled Egypt around 1200 BC. He was the pharaoh who invested more in his image than any other.
On me and they African. Gold on me like an African.
Now for a discovery which may surprise you. Scientists have found that most of us still have a little bit of a Neanderthal inside us.
The Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. So they're the real pure humans, Homo sapiens.
And so a long time passed, and the Great Spirit gave each of the 4 races 2 stone tablets. Ours are kept at the Hopi Reservation in Arizona, at Four Corners area, on 3rd Mesa. I've talked to people from the black race of people. Their stone tablets are at the foot of Mount Kenya. They are kept by the Kikuyu tribe. They are kept by the Kikuyu tribe. They are kept by the Kikuyu tribe. I once had the honor of presenting a sacred pipe of the Kikuyu tribe carved from the red pipestone of Mount Kenya. One time I was at an Indian spiritual gathering about 15 years ago, and a medicine man from South Dakota put a beaded medicine wheel in the middle of the gathering, and it had the 4 colors in the 4 directions. And he asked the people, "Where is this from?" And they said, "Oh, probably Montana, South Dakota, maybe Saskatchewan." He said, "This is from Kenya." It was beaded just like ours, same colors.
I'm up, they mad, they broke, they sad. I ain't going that bad, I ain't.
Look at the works of like all the great Greek historians, Hippocrates, Herodotus, they'll see the influence that Africa had on Europe as a whole. The ancient Egyptians used to have things called mystery schools or mystery systems, where they ran from Sudan all the way up into parts of Turkey, Ionia, places like that. And what used to happen there was people used to go and learn, or certain people, if they were lucky enough, used to go and learn, and over periods of time it's become kind of taboo to associate anything wise, knowledgeable, philosophical, intellectual with Africa. And that's what a lot of European historians and academics find hard to digest, is the fact that these guys, from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle to Herodotus to Hippocrates, all these guys, they were taught or influenced by the teachings of black Africans, ancient Egyptians. The ancient Greeks, how revered the Ethiops, which meant of the burnt face, how revered they actually were.
Wheresoever you go throughout the world, the black man is discarded, is ostracized, is relegated to the lowest in things, social, political, and economical. This therefore suggests a problem and one that must be solved. We in this section of the world are not entirely free from this unkind, unsympathetic, and uncharitable behavior of the groups or races around us. But since man has been placed on his own responsibility, whether he be black, white, or yellow, he must act on his own account. We will not unduly whine or complain, but reason among ourselves and see what can be done to remedy this state of affairs. Life is a conflict. You have to fight your way through it whether you will it or not. Those of us who are able to fight most stubbornly live, accomplish most, and to them go the laurels, the palms, and triumph of our civilization and world. We unfortunately have not been trained nor educated to the truths of life, paradoxically so.
The first museum in America dedicated entirely to slavery opened just a few months ago. Michelle Miller traveled to Wallace, Louisiana, and found a surprising history, not just about a plantation, but her own family. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. Well, about an hour's drive from New Orleans along the Mississippi River sits the Civil War-era sugarcane plantation. The Whitney Plantation looms as a stark reminder that our nation was built on the backs of slaves. It's a tough part of our history to remember.
Diamonds on me and they African.
You have African names, French names, Spanish names.
Next to those names are the narratives of the slaves themselves.
Doesn't mean much, but we make them talk. It is just a way for us to give them a voice, because these people were voiceless people.
One of the most important point is that we, even today, are still living with the effects of slavery, poverty, illiteracy, and crime. And
sleep on pallets on the floors. Beneath whitewashed ceilings, through quiet gardens, a dark history unfolds. Tourists peer into cages where slaves were beaten. Statues of black children stare back at them. In this sanctuary, memorializing the harsh reality of slavery.
Reparations. It's a term you've likely heard before, but what does it mean? It's a type of compensation given to a group of people who've suffered abuse at the hands of a more powerful group. In the US, it's often talked about in terms of slavery. But slavery was so long ago, and some ask, why should Black Americans be compensated now? Well, proponents argue that the US was built on the backs of slaves, and all our social institutions continue to reinforce rigid economic inequalities against blacks. It's easy to see why. From slavery, white families got rich, bought land, and cemented legacies, while black families were torn apart and kept in extreme poverty. From the dawn of America, the starting line for blacks was far behind the white majority. The Emancipation Proclamation did little to end the racial stigma of being black in America, and even less to ensure that ex-slaves could access the immense wealth that white America had accumulated off their labor. While all Americans of all backgrounds are deemed equal under the law, equality also means equal access to economic opportunity, healthcare, property, education, and justice. Black people have been systematically denied these things for the past 150 years. And not just by Jim Crow laws in the South. Every major American social institution has roots in slavery. The U.S. school system is still unequal and unofficially segregated. Teachers in minority schools make less money and are less likely to be certified. Black students are often at a disadvantage from day one, and fewer black boys graduate from high school. 60% of people behind bars in the U.S. are people of color, and black men are close to 6 times more likely than white men to go to prison. Housing discrimination continues as well. Thanks to old techniques like redlining, which deny home loans and insurance to people living in certain areas, and predatory lending, blacks have been forced to live in low-income neighborhoods and denied the chance to own homes. Oh, and then there's life expectancy. Black men die on average 5 years earlier than white men. The infant mortality rate for black babies is more than twice that of whites. Socioeconomic factors like diet, lifestyle, and lack of preventative care all come into play here. So you'd think all of this might make our nation's leaders want to have a discussion about reparations, but you'd be wrong. Congressman John Conyers Jr. has been introducing the same bill for 25 years, calling for a commission to discuss reparations. It's been shot down every time. And while there are many obstacles in the way of distributing reparations, it's not impossible. Take Germany, South Africa, and Chile, all countries that have given reparations to groups of people their governments mistreated. And even here in the US, reparations have happened. In 1988, the US began the process of reparations for more than 100,000 surviving Japanese Americans that were placed in incarceration camps during World War II. There are, of course, many questions, like who would get compensated and what specific problems would be solved. Reparations don't right the wrongs of the past, nor are they a means by which the conditions of people who've been grossly abused are somehow magically fixed. But in a country where the government has yet to formally apologize for slavery, something that began 400 years ago, isn't it time to start talking about what can be done to heal those wounds?
Secret plan for the next financial crisis.
Right.
Now, what are you saying about the global elites? Are they doing certain things before this crisis as far as stockpiling cash, doing certain things with their trades? And are they doing this because they know better, or are they conspiring with each other? And what can we learn from what you know?
The information, like the term, what the Egyptians used to have is the term neo. So a neo was known as a student, or a neophyte was known as a student, somebody who would go and learn, but they'd learn orally. So hence that's why Socrates never wrote anything down. I think a lot of people know the fact that the term know thyself is attributed a lot of the time to Socrates, but in actual fact, if you go to certain temples in Egypt and in parts of East Africa, you'll see the term inscribed, and it predates Socrates and any of those guys. So it goes to show you where he was getting taught.
Now it's no more crime, 'cause we upper echelon. I can give us our destiny. I can't go outside. I can't go outside. I can't go outside. Especially about that bitch. Take out. I can't go out. Sad about no bitch. Sad. Who me? Take off. Never mad about no bitch. Depressed. Need to get some of my chest. Ain't stressed about that bitch.
So yeah, Africa was great, right? It had vast empires with powerful kings and queens. It had legendary cities like Timbuktu, Merowe and Marrakesh, Cairo, and it even harbored the wealthiest man in human history, Mansa Musa. The African Gado Empire, the very first empire in West African history. The empire was founded by the Soninka people. Some highlights about the empire is that it had great Mande style architecture with vast stone structures and well-planned cities. So it was Askia the Great that started to put in the final work that devastated Mali. Once other vassal states saw that Mali was greatly weakened, they took full advantage and started breaking away one by one. Still, even then, while Mali was weakened, a window of opportunity and hope ran through because
African Revolution, Garvey tribute be a play. Seth Michaels, aka Prince Michael, you don't know. That's how we do it. A strictly roots and culture, repatriation, Garvey legacy.
How many of you have ever seen a map that looked like this before? How many of you have ever seen this map?
Seen that map.
Yeah. Isn't this the map that you use K through 16 in the United States of America? Now folks, look at this map. According to your social studies teacher, what is the equator?
Right,
an imaginary line where?
Yeah.
Around the center of the earth. Then if this map is correct, then the equator must be here, and Chicago has a tropical climate. Now people, this is a flat-out lie. Look at the size of Greenland and the size of South America. According to your social studies teachers, what were continents? Largest land masses on the face of the earth, right? Now, do you know the continents? Africa, Asia, Australia, Antarctica, Europe, North America, and South America. Did I say Greenland? Well, Greenland isn't a continent, but it's a huge landmass according to this map, right? The map is a flat-out lie, people. If you read the legend on the map, here it says, In fact, South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
Thinking about this idea of the South and the North and why do we always make the North the dominant thing. And then I saw a map that Al-Idrisi, the first Al-Idrisi was a Moroccan who did a world map, and he put the South on the top and he put the North on the bottom. The European map makers actually took from his book, but they realized the significance of putting the South on the top. It put Africa over Europe. And so they actually flipped it over and made their maps with the North on the top. And interestingly enough, if you read in the book called The Venture of Islam, Hodgson points this out, how back to putting the South on the bottom, because it's a completely Eurocentric worldview that actually does not have historical foundation.
Understand America's position in the world, and why it's so pivotal for world politics as we know it, you have to go back to the country's founding, back to when America wasn't a global power in any sense of the word.
So what was the point?
The scramble for Africa and the Berlin Conference. What was the scramble for Africa? In the 1800s, European countries were rushing into Africa to plant their flags in the land and claim colony. Because of industrialization, Europe wanted Africa's valuable resources. Some of these included palm oil, cotton, gold, diamonds.
The Industrial Revolution produced explosive economic growth. The United States was the only major power to avoid economic ruin during the war, and it was the sole country equipped with atomic weapons. As such, it was in a unique position to set the terms of the peace, and, with the aim of preventing another war in mind, it took advantage. The most famous example of this is the creation of the United Nations. The UN Charter set up a system of international law prohibiting wars of conquest, like the ones waged by the Nazis and the Japanese. It also served as a forum in which the international community could weigh in on disputes and help resolve them. This way, the Americans hoped, great powers could resolve their differences through compromise and law rather than war. But while the UN is the most famous of the post-war institutions, it isn't the only one.
Did the Greeks, Persians, Romans, modern European ancestors try to cover, hide, or destroy proof of the racial origin of the pharaohs, founders of a high civilization? How could that be?
This is a Hamiti Hebrew ethics presentation by priest teacher Rabbi L.M. Dumizo. Welcome, brothers and sisters. Live spirit of Amen. Spirit is power.
Is there proof of theft of African history? Africa the unknown.
It's very important that we all know the Kikuyu tribe of Mount Kenya are truly the chosen people of the Most High. And
only one aim: to seek divine intervention.
These niggas so scary, won't let them bury me. That's why I keep my 30, I shoot like Gary.
The very first scene in the entire Black Panther movie comes directly from Kikuyu history.
Intervention team within the tribal society. They're the ones responsible for knowing when an impending threat is coming to the community, like, you know, an earthquake, a drought, flood, colonizers, things like that. Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? So,
power to the nation, family. This video may be a little sensitive for brothers and sisters who teach against identifying ourselves with the color black. So I want to give the disclaimer that from an economic, legal, and judicial standpoint, those brothers and sisters have a very valid foundation for their teachings. But this video
is coming from a cultural dimension that's far outside the jurisdiction of the Western economic, legal, and judicial structures.
If God was like us,
had a squad just like us. Always popping tags just like us. Gucci bag just